Okay, I would like to call the Maryland Alcohol and Tobacco Commission January 19th, 2023 meeting at 3:00 p.m. to order. And we'll do a roll call. So Chairman Silverstein is here. Vice Chair Barbara Wall is here. Secretary Robert Poole.
Here.
We have Betty Buck, Commissioner.
Here.
And Commissioner Eric Morset is not with us. I need a motion for approval of the December 15th, 2022 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second the motion.
And they have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Not hearing any, the motion for the minutes are approved. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I'll just go over the statistics from since our last meeting. We had 13 incidents which required some level of investigation and in which people were charged for various violations. The large quantity of what we seized over the last period were other tobacco products. It was over 43,000 pieces, which is a lot of OTP. We seized 161 packages of contraband cigarettes, 44 containers of distilled spirits, 18 containers of beer, no wine. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of which counties. And the reason I do that is so you can see these are statewide issues, so you'll know where they're coming from. The counties in which these different violations took place, and some occurred multiple. I only mentioned the county once, or jurisdiction. Cecil County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Baltimore City, Howard County, Allegheny County, and Harford County. So it's really just spread across the state. Like the next mention to you, if I may, the annual report of the Alcohol Tobacco Commission, is submitted, is completed and submitted. I sent each of you a copy of that this morning, of the finished copy. You will also be getting very, very soon the annual tobacco and alcohol and tobacco tax report, which is a very comprehensive report. It went through final edits or a couple of tweaks that were made. I think they're done now. So either today or tomorrow, should be prepared to send you electronic copies, and that will be submitted also to the General Assembly and Department of Legislative Services. Another item of interest is the General Assembly is new this year in that we just had the election in November. So every 4 years we get a bunch of new members. So one, we need to really teach our new members, those new members, what we do and how things work relative to alcohol and tobacco. And secondly, in the Senate, we've been moved from what's called Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee to the Senate Finance Committee, which is a standing committee, has always been there, but most of our work in what was called EHE was there. So now we're part of finance. So really, it's not just new members, it's a new committee. So Tuesday afternoon, we gave a presentation before the Senate committee at their request. Had a lot of great questions. I think the presentation went well, a lot of great questions to help them understand how alcohol and tobacco are regulated in the state, why they're even regulated, little history, an explanation of who we are, what we can do, and then why we do what we do. And then again this morning on the House side in the Economic Matters Committee room, we were before the House with the same presentation essentially, and again a variety of questions. I will comment something that was a little different as we had more people invited, and so Chair Silverstein and Commissioner Buck both were able to attend. Thank you very much, and mix it with some of the legislators. Right before the meeting, I was teasing. Commissioner Buck and I were teasing because of her history as being a member of the industry and now being a member of the regulatory body. It was maybe a little conflicting, but she handled it like a champ. So, and she got to see some old friends. So that went very well also. One last thing, Mr. Chair, is you may recall in October we had the Alcohol Summit. And the purpose of that was not to give any answers about anything, but rather to hear a lot of concerns and complaints and issues, generally from the industry. And then what was going to come from that was a series of work group meetings where we would actually start to take a look at this stuff and see if there's any room for improvement, any updates or modifications to existing regulations, or any need to delete or add new ones. The first of our meetings is taking place next Thursday. We have a work group of about 11 or 12 various industry members, some manufacturers, some wholesale, some retail, some at-large interested people, and also a couple of regulators from within local jurisdictions around the state. So it's a fairly diverse group of industry components. And we will meet next week at 1 o'clock here at the Treasury Building in Annapolis in the Assembly Room. All of you commissioners have received that information this morning. And I have to thank Mr. Hock very much for saying, I'm happy to come if you need me, and just, I'll be there. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that because I realize now when I sent it, it looks like I'm saying, please come, and do please come if you'd like to. And if you do, I'll introduce all commissioners who come, but you don't have to. It's going to be a work group because essentially what I'm going to do is thank everybody for coming. Should any of our commissioners be there, introduce and give you an opportunity to speak if you'd like to, and then turn it over to people who are a lot smarter than me will actually get the work done, and then just sit in the back of the room quietly while it happens. So I anticipate there will be 3 or 4 of these meetings over a period of the next couple of months where we'll identify anything that might need to be changed, give it real consideration, with the result being if there are areas to improve, then we'll improve that. And once the General Assembly session is over, we'll prepare regulation to submit. We can't do anything before that. We'll prepare regulation to submit to be ready to put in once the General Assembly concludes its session, and make the changes that everyone's kind of agreed are the right things to do. So that starts next Thursday at 1. So all commissioners, please, if you'd like to come, please do. But please don't think there was any kind of a mandate there. This was really to let you know what's going on and keep you in the loop as to what activities are happening. And then, Mr. Chair, I have something that's probably best left up to new business. So I'd like to just get a shot at that again later on in the meeting, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
At this time, we have a special guest with us today, Dr. Rami Eck, founder and principal, Sunrise Solutions. Dr. Rami Eck has 20 years of clinical and public health training and experience focusing on the I knew I was going to screw that up. Use of alcohol, the harm, the environmental intentions to reduce acute and chronic causes of alcohol-related harm, and translating research into effective policy. Dr. Eck spent 7 years as a surgical physician assistant before achieving a master's and a PhD in public health from Johns Hopkins. Her experience is wide-ranging, having consulted locally with jurisdictions in Maryland on federal government contracts and regularly with the World Health Organization, among others. Dr. Eck was also recently a fellow at the National Cancer Institute, is on the faculty at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health Center for Public Health Advocacy, and teaches the course Media Advocacy and Public Health. Finally, she's worked closely with members of the General Assembly for years, focusing on policy for alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis through her leadership in the Maryland Public Health Association. We're privileged to have her join us today. Welcome, Dr. Eck.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Jeff, for inviting me here. It was so great to see you at NCSLA last 2 months, 3 months. Time has gone so quickly, I forget now, down in Richmond, where evidently this piqued your interest enough to share it with the commissioners, and I'm very glad to be with you all here today and hope that I can provide you something of interest. This is going to be a super quick snapshot, but if there's anything in here, please just make notes. I'm happy to talk about these things at other times or this afternoon or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to share, and I'll be honest, I'm, let's see. Oh, I'm usually in Zoom, so hold on. It's asking me to do things. So I'm saying yes, yes, and yes.
You won't do any worse than I've done every single time.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. We need permission to share your screen. Oh boy. Hold on 1 second. Let's see if I can fix this very quickly.
we'll take a look on our end too and see if it's something that needs to be switched for you.
My super safe Mac is telling me it just needs permissions to share this all, because I'm usually either on Teams or on Zoom or one of the other ones rather than sharing on Teams. So I apologize that this was unexpected. That's not. Are you able to see this yet?
No.
Not yet. Sometimes there is a few second delay between you actually engaging it. If it's popped up on your screen, it's likely to come up on ours.
I don't know why. I may need to email this to somebody.
If you want, email to me. I promise you, I'm going to make you look like a star because I'll screw it up a whole lot, but I'll do my best to share it from my screen if I can. And that's really, it's a very risky statement, but I'll try that.
All right, that's coming to you. So what I'll do is I'll just, I have this stuff memorized. I mean, I'm supposed to have been studying this for a long time. So essentially, the biggest message about public health and alcohol is why we're even here. So, you know, just one of the things, you know, we're talking about your alcohol summit, and I saw some of the presentations and heard a little bit about that before, but I'm only quoting you, Jeff, where you said this is a place for the industry to put in complaints. So that triggers in my mind, where's the place where public health gets to complain? So one of the things that's often missing in the work that we do policy-wise is that the voice of public health or of health itself or just of safety in that realm is missing from these conversations. And I say this in the best way possible. I think we have a good system in Maryland because I actually work a lot with the industry. I'm someone that they call on the phone, we talk, we have meetings during session, we touch base on a pretty regular basis with some of them. So we don't agree on probably half of what we do, but we understand each other and we understand the reasons we don't agree and we understand the ways that we can actually come to consensus. And if we get the slides in a bit, I will actually talk you through a case study of something that happened here in 21 because it really illustrates how this was able to, all of us were able to work together from where we came from and where we ended up. So as I mentioned, alcohol is really not an ordinary commodity. When I've been in hearings before, I've heard it compared to bread, to Black & Decker drills, to laundry detergent, to a convenience product. And these are not things that, and I don't think I'm telling anyone here anything you don't know, but it is not like those other products. We could have a store on the corner that sells laundry detergent on every corner, but we don't want an alcohol outlet in every single corner. Anyway, so that, oh, there we go. Fantastic. Yeah, just briefly, so the prevention potential, this is how I've been talking about it for the last year or so, and I've been doing a lot of the talks that I've done for all different groups, is looking as it as a prevention for harm, a prevention for disease, and that's what you actually can do with laws. Because a lot of times people are working with programs and of smaller interventions, but I've been working in policy so long, and it's a way to show how these broad policies are actually ways to reduce harm from disease and from injury too. So you can keep on going. There's going to be like a pyramid. We know it's ancient. So oh, right here, go back one if you can.
Yep.
This is your little trivia for the day. From 1900 to 1999, the 10 greatest public health achievements which include things like vaccines, safer workplaces, family planning, fluoride in our water. These contributed to 25 of 30 years of life expectancy that we gained in the 20th century. So medical interventions, surgical, clinical medications, those contributed to about 5 of those years. These broad population interventions are what actually has caused us to live longer lives, to live longer than our great-grandparents did, and really anyone prior to their generations. Go ahead to the next slide. And that's really why public health is so important. An easy way to look at this is a pyramid that was created by Tom Frieden when he was at the CDC about 12, 13 years ago. And these are factors that affect health and also sort of the degree of impact that they have. So at this top of this pyramid, where we have the smallest impact, we have counseling and education. So examples of just being healthy, being physically active, eating healthy. Clinical interventions, a little bit broader, treatments for high blood pressure, diabetes, so other types of medications. And then we have long-lasting protective interventions, so immunizations, brief interventions that you would do in an emergency room, cessation treatment for different substances. And then at this place here, this next level, this is the changing the context to make individuals' default decisions healthy. That's really where public health lives. And that includes things like fluoride in the water, 0 grams trans fat, smoke-free laws, tobacco taxes. And then finally, the bottom, the largest impact, these socioeconomic factors like poverty, education, these are kind of overhanging all these other things. But go ahead forward. So that's where public health lives. Next slide. Yep. So we can put this also on an alcohol pyramid. And we can look at things, so counseling and education at the top, so things like alcohol education and counseling, screening and brief interventions. And then if we go down to this changing the context, that's really why we work on these types of things. So removing dangerous products like alcoholic energy drinks from the marketplace, increasing excise taxes, reducing alcohol outlets, restricting and reducing alcohol marketing, especially towards youth. This is really where public health likes to live because it changes our actual environment that we are experiencing on a daily basis. And then over there on the left, you can see that arrow now, in addition to having the impact, it also talks about the political will that is needed. So for counseling and education, very little political will, pretty much everyone on board with that. And then when you get down to talking about outlet density and taxes, there's a whole lot of political wills to make those things move. I will tell you that everything on this pyramid works together, though. It's not as if we hunt and peck and say we want this and not that. These things really work together, and that is the best way that we can move forward. Next slide. So this is my single epidemiological slide just to talk to you about what the actual impact is of health and finance. So it's the most commonly used drug in the US. A little over half of the population does drink on a monthly basis. Alcohol contributes to more than 200 ICD codes, so different injury and disease codes. It's the 4th leading actual cause of death. 1 in 10 deaths among working age adults are caused by excessive drinking. And the cost estimates that we have, they're from 2010, but I know the CDC has been working on updating these for us, hopefully soon. But these are annual costs. The annual cost of excessive drinking is $249 billion, and that includes drinking by pregnant people, underage drinking, and binge drinking. Next slide. Some of those ICD-10 codes and those disease and injury processes, so different types of cancer, pancreatitis and hepatitis, some of the things we're more familiar with, but also hypertension, homicide, low birth weight, motor vehicle crashes, suicide. Next slide. Another part of this is something that was incredibly impactful for the tobacco field, was their concept of secondhand smoke. We also have that in alcohol. It's called alcohol harms to others. So that what alcohol contributes to harm to people other than the drinker themselves. And this would include physical, sexual, psychological violence, financial harms you may experience from someone else's drinking, property crimes, crashes involving other types of drivers. And we're starting to have a lot of research that quantifies both the types of harms and also the cost that these harms cause to individuals and the cost that causes to society. Next slide. So the economic cost, as I mentioned, is a national average of $249 billion. That's about $2.05 per drink, or $807 is the cost per capita for every person. And if you look at just Maryland's cost, our cost annually is about $5 billion in terms of the cost of excessive drinking. It's about $2.22 per drink, so a little bit higher than the national average, and $860 cost per capita. And when those numbers are updated, we'll also get newer state numbers too. Next slide. Some of the research I was involved with, some of my colleagues, is we actually looked at alcohol and its association with violence, and we looked at it specifically here in Maryland. So we were actually able to quantify the number of violent crimes when we did this research in 2015, and you can see over 2,700 robberies, 4,500 aggravated assaults, just under 500 sexual assaults, and 259 homicides. And these are numbers just for the state of Maryland. Next slide. We went one step further and we actually quantified the financial cost, both of these harms, and then as a total. So we said $655 million was the cost of alcohol attributable violent crimes, and that comes up to be about $109 per resident. Next slide. One of the things I mentioned earlier, alcohol outlet density. This is how many outlets you have in a certain area that you're measuring. And when we did work in Baltimore City, just visually, this is something that was very impactful for people to see, is when you compare the number of alcohol outlets to fast food, libraries, supermarkets, you can see what people actually have access to. And it leaves you wondering, do they need to have access to this many things compared to those many things? Next slide. One of the things that has also been a major player here in the state, and in most other states too, and has been growing rapidly, is the craft brewing market. So if we go back to 1983, you can see there were only about 43 breweries across the entire nation. As of 2020, which is my latest numbers that I have, it's probably more by now, we're just under 9,000. And this number doesn't even include the distillers, which was a much, much smaller number, but has been increasing much more rapidly after the breweries now have grown so much. And these numbers, again, were a little bit older, but the reason I show you that too, oh, that's okay. The reason I show you that too is if you want to condense all of the research, go to the next slide, condense all the research into one sort of picturesque statement. As alcohol availability goes up, alcohol-related harms also increase. And one way to walk through this is that if we look at the number of alcohol outlets that are out there, and these outlets could be any types of outlets, they have done research on all the different types of outlets, but in general, when the number of outlets increases the competition among retailers, alcohol prices tend to go down, alcohol use tends to go up, and alcohol-related harms therefore follow and also increase. Next slide. Another thing I'd like to point out is another reason we get involved in here is just product innovations. So there's immediate and long-term effects for some of these product innovations. So different products that are coming into the market. Our standard drink, what we usually use to measure, is a bottle of beer that is 5%. So just keep that in mind. That's what we traditionally use. Many new products are 7, 8, 9% alcohol. So if you look at that little picture on the right, you have your 1 pint of beer, an 8% beer. That's actually equivalent to over 2 single standard drinks. So when people are reporting, I only had 1 or 2 beers, in effect, they're actually having 2 to 4 beers in terms of the amount of alcohol they're consuming. Other products like juice, Four Loko, this is a 23.5 ounce can of 14% alcohol. That's equivalent to 5.5 single bottles of beer of a standard serving. This can comes in a pop top, so you really are expected to drink it in 1 single serving. And I know a lot of people are adding shots of vodka and of rum to make it even higher in alcohol content. So again, everyone thinks I only had 1, but when you look at 1 actually means, there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what 1 actually means. Next slide. And just to mention briefly, during COVID, we weren't sure at the beginning what we would see. We definitely knew that drinking was increasing. A lot of people were reporting increases in not only drinking, but increases in heavy drinking. We actually saw a change in alcohol-related deaths during COVID. So 25% relative increase between 2019 and 2020. Previous increases were just over 2%. Our all-cause mortality is about 16.6% increase. So you can see that the alcohol-related increase was definitely more than the all-cause mortality. That has continued to go up a little bit, and this is research that's coming out of the CDC. So we're waiting to see, or NIAAA, I'm sorry. So we're waiting to see as they follow these trends out, is this something that's going to go back down, or is this something that's going to stay at this new level of higher consumption? Next slide. We're really concerned about this for a number of reasons. Just in general, you can think, are people drinking more? That could lead to short-term increases in acute injuries and harms, but also the longer-term implications. So when I was at National Cancer Institute, this was a special concern because down the line, are we going to see increases in alcohol-related cancers because of this increase right now at this point in time? For me, I'm also particularly concerned about the 41% increase in heavy drinking among women. And also the 107% increase in additions to the liver transplant list and 210% increase in recipients of transplant. And they look between 2018 to 2020 versus 2020 to 21. So liver transplants, and this is because of alcoholic liver disease specifically, that's been driving up for the last couple years. But this extremely large jump during COVID is something that a lot of people are very concerned about and watching very closely. Next slide. So to talk about, and the final part here is talking about policy specifically. Really, we have 3 pillars of alcohol regulation. I say we, me, some of my colleagues, other people probably have other pillars, but these are the ones that really drive the work that I do. Keeping in mind that alcohol is not an ordinary commodity, so we don't treat it the same. We keep in mind the important role of science in informing and enforcing alcohol regulations. And then also we have to find that balance between public safety and commercial interests. That's one of the things that I think is the most interesting about the field that we work in, because we're talking about a legal product that is enjoyed by many, many people and should be part of society. However, at the same time, it can't be treated the same because it is a product with toxic properties. Next slide. So some of the current issues and challenges that we've been working with is that we're in a general deregulatory environment. There's a characterization of alcohol regulatory systems as outdated or of antique, and really a misunderstanding of what these regulatory systems are for. So I'm glad to see that you've been going to the committees and talking to them about what do we actually do and why do we do this? And if you want to get into some of the history going all the way back to, you know, prohibition and beyond, it's really fascinating how we've come to where we are. There's problems with terminology. So who knows what a tied house is anymore and why it's important. And temperance sounds moralistic and old fashioned. So people tend not to use that word anymore, or else you get these terrible labels. There's been a rise of the craft brewers and distillers, which don't fit neatly into the 3 tiers. So some people don't really even know what to do with them. There's a crossover with cannabis legalization, a rise of e-commerce. So sending these things directly to people's doors and the associated harms that may be there. And then just deregulation through defunding. If you don't give people money, they can't do the work that you expect them to do. Next slide. So as I promised, there's a case study, and I hope this will be a little bit illustrative of some of the things that we've done. And I keep saying we, I'll actually tell you who some of the we are, because there is a group. It's not me, the royal we. So in the Maryland 2021 General Assembly, you probably remember there was the sale or delivery of alcoholic beverages for off-premises consumption, or the cocktails to go bill. It was introduced as permanent legislation with no limiting parameters. And the way I like to look at it is everyone can continue selling alcohol to go and for delivery anytime, anywhere, forever. Amen. So we weren't thrilled with that because the bill itself was like, 3 sentences. So next slide. We did a little bit of background work, and we used our voices to talk about some of the potential unintended consequences we could have with something like this. We use data and research as a guide. And here's where I'll tell you who the we is. We actually have an alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis network. It's a group of people from universities, researchers, policy groups, neighborhood associations. There's the Baltimore Good Neighbors Association. We have the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. We have the Network for Public Health Law, whom I know you all work with very closely, and their wonderful group, and Maryland Alcohol Licensing Association, and a whole lot of other sort of individuals and interested parties. We meet monthly, sort of like you all do, for an hour. We share concerns. We always have some sort of topic. And now during session, we meet every other week. We're mostly focusing on cannabis this year. That's the big issue. But this is a group of, like I said, researchers to neighborhood associations and people who are all interested in this topic and trying to speak with the same voice in some of the recommendations that we make. So one of the big things that we pointed out was often missing is considerations for additional burden on the administration and enforcement of the different laws that come in. So you can't just tell people to do something if you don't give them the capacity to be able to do it, either through funding or through extra manpower. Again, that's probably something that rings true to you all as a new group and some of the struggles I know you've had. Implications for potential product innovations and how these things are actually going to be sold. Missing is input from local licensing boards and enforcement officers, and then the health and safety voices. Next slide. So we brought data to the table. One of a University of Maryland law students at the network's law clinic called every jurisdiction in Maryland. She was able to speak with 16 of them, and 13 reported they had not even performed any compliance checks. Many reported being underfunded and understaffed to actually monitor the new carryout and delivery licenses. It just wasn't something they could add to their existing work. They were concerned about COVID exposure, and then just sort of generally overall concerned about increasing number of licenses to monitor, the inability to charge fees, a number of other types of things. Next slide. So in Montgomery County, I actually did a mystery shops program. Click forward one. And it showed that 55% of the business did not check ID, and only 15% stated that IDs would even be checked at the pickup. So they were the one of 2 jurisdictions that actually did some sort of enforcement and found really terrible compliance rates. Next slide. So taking all of that and using that during sort of the hearings, the final bill ended up with this laundry list. So remember at the beginning, anyone could do anything they want, anytime, forever, amen. Here we have something that gives some guidelines. So jurisdictions could opt out if they wanted, some qualifiers for how it actually could be sold, had to be ended by 11 p.m., who could actually deliver it. And one of the things that we really liked that they added was they actually were going to do a study on this, which I know is finished or in the works being finished, including the impact on public health of this new legislation, because since it was new here, it was new in other states, it's not something we had a ton of research on other than things that we thought would likely happen. And then it also sunsets at June 30th of this year. And that would give us time to actually assess it and decide whether it's something we wanted to make permanent or not. So you can see, and this was, again, I said we had the Alcohol, Tobacco, Cannabis Network, but we also worked with people from the Retail Association, hospitality, wholesalers, and things like that. And honestly, we agreed on many of these things. And the worst thing during a hearing that came up was, I think the Restaurant Association wanted to sunset in 3 years. We wanted to sunset in 1 year. One of the legislators looked at us and said, can we do 2 years? And we all said, sure. And that was literally the worst that happened during that. And because of a lot of the work we had done behind the scenes, it didn't take up a tremendous amount of time during the hearings themselves. And I think that's it. Let me see the last slide. Yeah, so thank you very much. I hope you found this informative, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. Having been born and raised in the alcohol industry, but agreeing with 99% of what you just said, can other people like myself come to your monthly or now every other week meetings?
That would be something I would ask the committee or the network themselves. We don't have industry folks that come to the meeting just because we need a place so we can discuss things and then go off and talk to them separately. But you all being regulators, I'll have to talk to them and see what they think.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, Dr. Eck, I want to thank you for the presentation today. It was very informative, and I know Jeff spoke very highly of the information that you have, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, just to comment on that report. First of all, did it stop sharing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I didn't really get an indication of that. So, okay, thank you. You know, again, Ramey and I happened to be at this conference together in Richmond, and it's a conference of liquor administrators from across the country. And when this particular presentation came up about public health, I thought, yeah, I know, I got it. And as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, good Lord, I don't have it. I didn't know a lot of stuff, and I really didn't understand what the role was. As it lucked out, we got to talk afterward. I said, you know, we need to hear this. We need to see where it fits. I mean, I love the triangle, or the pyramid rather, to show where you fit and what you impact. It's really informative. The report that we're doing, it's a joint report between the ATC and Department of Health. We finished up our part of it. We essentially surveyed local boards, liquor boards, and we surveyed retailers to send out to we didn't get, if there are 9,000 retailers, we didn't get 9,000 responses. You may be surprised to find out, but we got a few. And we didn't draw conclusions. We just said what they were, just kind of expressed what they are. And we sent our completed work over to MDH. MDH has also completed their work. And my understanding is it is going through the final review by the last people that are reviewers for MDH before they send the report off. So we've done our part. They're really close to finishing up their part. I think they wanted to give the new administration a chance to preview this perhaps, and also decide how they'll go about doing certain things. But it's imminently will be out very soon, I believe. So.
Can we get a copy of the slides?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if it's okay with you, I can send it out. Since I have a copy of, I've got all their email addresses. I can send it out very easily.
Because there may be notes in there that make absolutely no sense.
Understood.
So let me just check through it one more time, and then
sure.
I'll
okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if you send me the final version of what you want, I can just broadcast it from there if you want me to.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Good.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments? Once again, thank you, Dr. Heck.
You're welcome.
Very informative. New business, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thanks. So one of the obligations, one of the mandates of the commission itself is to develop best practices for a litany of things, and I want to talk about one specifically because it's very timely. In the law, it says that you will develop best practices for the development of a public health impact statement for all changes to the state alcoholic beverage laws. So that's specifically in statute that's one of the items you're obligated to do. And it's very timely because the General Assembly is in session and we're going to start getting a lot of alcohol bills. So far, we've only seen 3 that we've had to weigh in on, but here's what we get typically. Typically, it could be 80 to 90 bills come in every year. It's a lot. When you look at the type of bill, the genre of bill, it's one of the more heavily weighed in on topics. And about 90 to 95% of those are usually local bills, meaning that it only impacts a local jurisdiction. An example of that might be in Talbot County. Well, Talbot County is not a great example. It is a great example because they can do their own thing. So I'm not casting aspersions on anybody else. Talbot County wants to have a barbershop license where you can go to a barbershop and you can get a glass of wine or maybe 1 beer. It limits how much you can have, but you need a permit for that. So they'll create a Talbot County permit for barbershops or hair salons or nail salons or any number of things. So they only impact a region. They don't impact the whole state. That's what most of the bills are. Then there are a few, 5 to 10%, that are statewide bills, and they typically are impacting manufacturers or wholesalers and what they're allowed to do. So our job isn't to weigh in on these. Our job is to create a best practice on how to get a public health impact statement on the record, how to get that to happen. And what we think are one of 2 things, and they're both very, very similar. We get these bills, we review them, we talk about them every week. We will take these bills as the ATC and forward them to one of 2 or both entities, the local boards where that's being impacted when it's a local bill, and or the local Department of Health in that jurisdiction where it's happening, and suggest to them that they review the bill, that they weigh in on any public health issues or concerns, give them the reporting procedures, with how they are to file testimony. And that's really the best way to get that on there. It's not something we can add on fiscal notes. It isn't something that, I'll say that easy, it just isn't practical to put them on the fiscal notes. And for a whole lot of reasons, that creates problems. We think having the local board and or the local Department of Health, adding some sort of having the opportunity to submit timely testimony is probably the way to go. And I mention this now to you because for the sake of the Open Meetings Act, I just want to get what we're talking about out there. One of 2 things, send it to a local board or send it to a local health department. We'll nail down the details on that. And so then what I'd like to do is send it to you, but it's timely to get this enacted as quickly as we can. So I'll assume the burden of putting this into one of 2 formats, letting you know what we think is the best, and then sending it around to each of you commissioners for comment and weigh in. But like I said, for open meeting purposes, I just wanted to get it out there that that's something we're going to work on and hope to have implemented long before next meeting.
Okay, any other new business? If not, I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Need a second, please?
I second it.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. See you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you.